Thanks, Adam. Good morning. So happy to be joined this morning with Melanie Kalmar, who is the CIO and Chief Digital Officer at Dow. Aaron Levie, who is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Box.
I wanted 3 titles here too, so
we could keep going if you'd like. But, we're going to talk about just the digitization of industry. I think it's something that affects most everybody who's here. Are you digital? Are you physical? What kind of collaboration? What kind of technology? What's the role of IT? What's the role of digital? How do you work together the physical side and the digital side? So let's sort of jump in. Aaron, I know because I've participated, you have put together an amazing hypothesis and even a class at Stanford about the Industrialist Dilemma. What is it, and why should we be thinking about it?
Yeah, so thank you for that endorsement, the amazing class. So so going back 4 years ago, this is a little more novel. Today, it's not as much, but so at Box, we work with 87,000 companies globally, 70% of the Fortune 500, and so we get a front row seat in terms of how companies are transforming and responding to digital. And going back 4 or 5 years ago, we noticed that a lot of companies were sort of, unfortunately, experiencing sort of missteps in digital transformation. So we wanted to analyze
No one here will recognize that.
No, I think everybody at this event has had no missteps, but elsewhere, we had noticed that companies' sort of first forays into digital sometimes didn't work. They would buy companies, they would build labs, they would sort of think that maybe the way to solve their problem was put ping pong tables in the lunchroom, and all of a sudden you look like Google. And so we said, what is it about a digital company that is run differently than an industrial company? What are the different operating models, culture models, business models, all of those things? And how could we figure out what was preventing industrial companies in terms of their scale, their complexity, the hierarchy of how the organization gets managed? What about running an industrial company was preventing organizations from being able to adapt in the digital age? So what was actually the very things that were making them insanely successful for the first 100 years or 150 years
And what
of their
are
lives?
a couple of those things?
Yeah, I think they're the things that we all collectively know today, which is that to be able to scale as an industrial company, you had to have your own manufacturing facilities. You had to have your own infrastructure. You had to have all of your employees, all of the resources in your organization had to be employees as opposed to partners or contractors. The hierarchy of the organization was incredibly tops down because you didn't have digital platforms where people could share information. So you fundamentally had to actually cascade information in a much more command and control-like way. So all of these things that made it possible for Ford to become Ford and GE to become GE, all of a sudden became now liabilities in being able to adapt and transform. And so we sort of try to diagnose that, and we're going into our 4th season this spring, and hopefully we'll come out with even better answers than the past couple of years.
Maybe a book in that?
Maybe if you write it, yeah.
Oh, I won't be writing. Melanie, so you're hearing this, he's talking about the Industrialist Dilemma, yet you represent a 120-year-old company. You haven't gotten here without learning a thing or two about reinvention. What's Aaron's thesis missing, and what's right about it?
Oh, well, absolutely.
I mean,
Aaron described that legacy company that we heard introduced earlier, and I like to think that Dow's a 121-year young company, and we have historically reinvented ourselves multiple times over the years.
You wouldn't be here if you hadn't.
No, we wouldn't, and I think a lot of manufacturing or industrial companies have had to do that by the nature of the business. And if you look at our business portfolio, I mean, several years back, we even divested, one of the core businesses that was part of, what the Dow company was set up for. And, we're going through a huge M&A activity right now. You've probably heard about the merger of Dow DuPont, and we're planning to spin out 3 companies. So we've gone through this reinvention and this M&A change a lot. We typically have anywhere from 70 to 100 M&A and D deals per year.
But digital is harder, right?
But digital, and from a Dow standpoint, we're really looking at digital as just that next reinvention. But it is different because it gets at the core of how you do work. And you really have to step back and not continue to add capabilities. And I think that's where a lot of companies have failed, is they've looked at digital as an add-on to what they do already. It's a new tool, a new mobile app. And the reality is you have to step back and really rethink how you execute your work on a day-to-day basis and how you can simplify, because like many other industrial or legacy companies, we've built up our workforce over time, and as new employees come in, the prior employees teach them how to do their job, and they just continue to take forward steps in their day-to-day business process They continue to take those forward versus stepping back and saying, how can we simplify this? So you have to step back and really look at what are you trying to accomplish.
But Aaron, you've probably seen this with, you said 87,000 customers. That's huge. I mean, you've probably seen this with all the customers you work with. They think they're digitizing what they make, and instead they're digitizing the way they work. I'm going to come back and ask Melanie how they're doing it, but how have you seen, what would you, these are potential customers or maybe some of your customers, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think that so to Melanie's point on this sort of, the challenge of a lot of companies sort of start by saying, okay, we have X product, and to digitize it, we're just going to connect it to the internet, and that is how we're going to go through digital transformation. And that might be an existing business process, that might be an existing product that they deliver, and we've seen a lot of ill-fated exercises by that being we've seen some successes, but we've seen a lot of ill-fated strategies because of that approach, which is I'm going to take the existing thing that I do and just apply the internet to it. And that's really not what digital is all about. Digital is the ability to basically get as close to your customer as is humanly possible, because there's simply no separation between your organization and ultimately delivering that customer value proposition. And so in many respects, the power of digital is not to fundamentally change what you do or how you serve your customer at the highest level. It's not that you have to pivot your company or change your business model in a fundamental way. It's that you have to use technology to be able to get closer to your customer, be able to build an organization that can be much more nimble, much more agile, to be able to leverage the data inputs and signals that you're getting from customers to be able to make better products and make sure those products are informed by how the customer is using them, not necessarily all of a sudden completely change the entire industry that you're in. And I think a lot of companies sort of have gone down the path, and I blame Silicon Valley for this, because we sort of pontificate.
Why not? Everybody else is blaming Silicon Valley.
Well, yeah, you might as well. We might as well add us in this panel as well. But I think what we've seen is and this is actually a thesis change that we had in the class, which is we initially thought startups were going to just take over every single industry, and
remember Mark Andreessen, software is going to eat the world.
Right. Yep. And we believe it, and we continue to spread that. And I think there are the essence of those points are true, but the manifestation isn't necessarily what we thought it would be. We thought it would be startups all completely taking over, and actually the bigger trend we're seeing is which incumbents leverage digital better than other incumbents to be able to better serve their customers, and that is the more I think that is the more differentiating tactic we're now seeing.
Yeah, Melanie. And Beth, I would add to that. I mean, Aaron talked about the customer, and absolutely, it's about how do you get closer to your customer, so you can collaborate and innovate with them, but it's also about how you make the work for your employees easier.
So give us some examples of how you're doing that.
How do you drive a better outcome-based focus?
Yeah. So how are you doing it?
Again, it's looking from an employee standpoint, it's looking at how do they do their jobs today and how do you make that easier. So some examples, if you think about our manufacturing sites and where we're loading materials on rail cars or on ships, providing our loaders with digital procedures so they're not carrying around paper in the wind and the rain, and you can update changes automatically because ships don't necessarily come in on time. There's a lot of variability there. So some real game changers for our employees. And one of our examples, a very simple example with our digital procedures is one of our schedulers talked to me and said that this really changes her life because now she can be at the soccer field with her daughter and update the procedure for the loader who's there in the middle of the night loading the dock, and she doesn't have to come in and redo paperwork.
But you're talking about change management as well. How are you getting employees and customers ready to change because what's their motivation?
That's absolutely the tough part. But if what you're delivering is providing a benefit, that change management becomes much easier.
Some tips on how you're doing it?
Yeah.
Enforce them? Do you get them into the room and say you can't leave until you do this? Does that work?
No. You have
modern
to start,
management. Yeah, I think this is what.
Modern management.
Yeah, it has to start at the top. I mean, we've all heard about culture change, and I think digitalization really helps with the culture change if you have the right message coming from the top. And it's about getting people excited about getting connected and really understanding your customers better. And to me, that motivates, that more than anything motivates your employees.
So it's vision, it's outcomes, so you spend a lot of time on here's where we're going, here's the outcome we're trying to drive to.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
you've got to paint that picture of what it is, and we talk about it at Dow as our ambition. What is our ambition and what do we want to accomplish and change with our customers and our stakeholders?
Ambition is a good word. Aaron, talk about some of the tactics that everyone here can take from your software first company, Agile. What are some things people can think about to drive their company, drive their customers?
Well, the first and most important thing in any digital transformation strategy is to use Box. So that's obviously that's a core part of any journey that you might be on. But I think a lot of, again, we're right in the center of the valley, so we try and figure out which lessons apply, which don't apply. But I think probably the single biggest lesson that applies to any company, any organization, any part of the business is really the essence of agility. And when you think about at least our own kind of journey on Agile is in the software development practices of our organization. So when we were 4 or 5 or 6 people, we would sit around a room, we'd build software, we'd test it against the market, we would iterate constantly, we'd get data coming in live from the customer base to see how our product could be improved or how it could be different, and then we would continue to iterate. And that idea of small teams working in concert, being able to be incredibly close to the customer problem, being able to adapt to the customer problem in real time, and then scale that out. That is what we think is at the heart of running a digital organization.
Do you help your customers do that?
Our technology does, because we make it easy to sort of flatten the complexity of your organization so people can share and collaborate. But other products like Slack or Facebook Workplace, there are plenty of technologies that help you do this. And this is a technology and a cultural challenge. And I think that we make it seem really easy because we just say buy our software from Silicon Valley. But the amount of cultural change you have to say, how do I get 5 or 10 people to be on a team, to be able to be incredibly close to the customer, to be able to iterate and adapt in real time, be able to, we heard in earlier panels, take risks and make that safe to take those risks, where maybe you're not going to celebrate the risks, but you at least are going to amplify the nature of risk taking, which is you have to be able to go into parts of the business that are, or solutions that are unknown. You have to be able to iterate in front of the customer live and be able to actually show your.
So there's risk and courage required, because you're saying to the customer, I'm going to give you something not perfect.
Yes, and you have to be able to actually accept that and not, you can't get fired the moment that doesn't work out within the organization. So you have to actually have a culture that embodies being able to support those risks. You have to obviously leverage data to be able to make these decisions. So you need to be able to actually have signal coming in from your customer. And so it's really easy to think about this as a 5 or 10 person startup. Now the question is, how do you do that at the scale of a 100,000 person company? How do you do that in HR? How do you do that in finance? How do you do that in marketing?
Enter Melanie. So
yeah,
Melanie, someone said that you had the most complicated job in IT. So I just want to get that out there. The most complex job in IT. Tell us how you do that with the most complex job in IT.
Yeah, it's about changing behaviors. And Aaron talked about how technology companies have become more agile or use agile techniques in your development. We take that to scale within a business like Dow, or within a company like Dow with multiple businesses. I've got the IT team that's operating in agile teams, agile form, but we're taking that all the way to our customers. And one of the things that we've done is we've stood up digital centers. We have 4 or 3 digital marketplace centers, one right here in Chicago. We've got one in Latin America, one in Asia Pacific, and we're standing one up in Europe right now. But what we've done with those centers is we've really put a roof in place where we can bring people with the right skills together to work with our customers to understand what their needs are and really do this, agile at scale, where we're out there really sitting down with our customers and developing capabilities with them.
Is the intent to scale that out throughout the rest of the organization?
Absolutely, where it makes sense. And the reason we have these digital marketplace centers in the different geographies is there are different needs when you go to different geographies. So the centers operate as a network, and they share and leverage the capabilities that they're developing, but they also serve their specific markets too.
Your job title is Chief Digital Officer and Chief Information Officer. What's the difference, and would you recommend that as a structure for other companies?
And does one side fight with the other?
Yeah, do I have arguments with myself? Yeah. And we heard yesterday somebody said, don't name a Chief Digital Officer because, everybody has to be digital. But the reality is you have to have somebody to get the momentum going. And in a company like Dow, the CIO role that I've had is more than just technology and infrastructure. It's always been very engaged with the business and looking at how we help solve business problems. So adding the Chief Digital Officer role to that is really speaking to the culture change and the behavior change that we need to go along with the technology introduction.
Aaron, how would you, with all the companies you've worked with, how do you rate that kind of a structure, and how you find working with CIOs? I mean, I know our experience working together was mixed in how you had to deal with some of the CIOs in companies like GE.
I think it was entirely positive. But,
it worked in the end.
Yeah, we got through it. I think that it's a natural thing for extremely large companies to have a bunch of embedded processes that make it hard to be nimble and work with startups, and that was what we ran into 5 or 6 years ago early on in the relationship. But I think you want to be partners with the types of companies you want to look like and that you want to operate like. And so that ability, and I think GE was very early in this trend, to be able to go and partner up with companies that are going to impact and change and shape the culture way more than just the software that we provide, but ultimately how we operate and how we can kind of work together. And we've seen the bleeding edge CIOs like Melanie and others and CDOs that sort of take advantage of building out an ecosystem of modern technology companies that they're going to be able to work with, to be able to learn from and sort of chart this path with. If all you do is spend your time with the same vendors you've been working with for 10, 20, 30 years, you're not going to fundamentally be able to adapt to the kinds of new characteristics of how we're building technology and how we're operating.
So let's take a few questions. Anyone have some questions you'd like to offer of Aaron or Melanie?
And if not, I have monologues. So
oh no, Aaron's a comedian too, so it might be good we could have him tell us a few jokes.
You don't want enterprise software jokes, I promise. Not this early in the morning.
So while people are thinking, I know they have questions. While they're thinking, Melanie, talk about how do you level up your IT team? Because to what Aaron's talking about, some people obviously have to be traded out or they need training. How do you think about that? Maybe not just IT, but let's start with IT.
Yeah, you have to start with I think to get people motivated, you have to have a modern IT strategy. And one of the things that we focused on the last couple years is really uplifting our strategy and making it a strategy for the company that everyone can latch onto, not just a strategy for the IS or IT department. Yep. And spend a lot of time, really good conversations, and it's a great way to build the relationship with our business leaders, with our functional leaders around the globe, to really put something together that's focused on, a strategy for the company around adopting IT and digital, and it's about focusing on the customer, focusing on the employee first. And in fact, that's now part of our strategy for the company. It's embedded in our strategy, and everything we do, we have to ask ourselves, is this going to improve and help our customers, or is this going to improve and help our employees and how they do their work, or we shouldn't be doing it?
Yeah. Any takers of a question? So in the time we have left, Aaron and Melanie, I'd like you to sort of wrap up. Give us some advice. So everybody's going to go back to their office tomorrow, probably, or sometime this week. What can they do differently to be more agile, to be more adaptable, to digitize their jobs? And then Melanie, what have you found that works? And give us some homework assignments. So Aaron, what can people do differently when they get back to work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so a couple different things. One is I would start with the premise that that digital is about getting closer to your customer, being much more nimble. So if you start with that premise, and ultimately your job is to deliver the sort of best product that is solving your customers' problems because of digital, and not something that they don't want just because you can make it kind of internet connected. Ask yourself what gets you closer to that outcome because of what digital is able to deliver. The second thing I would say is think about what is the smallest possible unit of a team that can go in and accomplish the outcomes that you're looking to solve, whether that's in marketing, in HR, in finance, because that is the power of digital is small teams, interconnected, at scale, going after a massive problem for your organization. And I think so much of the complexity of organizations is embedded in the hierarchy of the organization, the flow of information, the silos that get created where all of a sudden sort of hoarding information is how you amass power inside of a company, as opposed to being able to share it, being able to be much closer to the customer and nimble with that data. So really think about how is the culture operating as your organization scales, and can you take the principles of Agile and scale that up?
Melanie.
And really, to build on that, really check your organizational structure in terms of how flexible can you be in that organization. I mean, a lot of our HR systems really limit us, or how we've set up our hierarchies limit us, and you've really got